Hello again. So, before we start, let's set our motivation, consider all beings and as our brothers and our sisters, suffering in many, many different ways, and consider how we might best help and shoulder on the responsibility to look after and to cherish and to nurture and to bring lasting happiness through achieving liberation, enlightenment, freedom from suffering. The best way to do that is as Buddha. So if we recognize that, then we can accept the path, and we can accept the path to Buddhahood and engage in the six perfections. And in order to do that, we need to learn and consider and develop an understanding, experiential understanding and practice of the six perfections. So that's why we're here today. And so for the next few minutes for us to really try to make a difference and inform ourselves and learn how best we can use this. Okay, so last session we touched on the first part of the main part of the two primary obstacles to serenity, which is excitement and laxity. Both of these lead to distraction from the object of our meditation. Excitement through getting a little bit too high or a little bit too tight in the mind, generally related to a distraction caused by too much enjoyment. Also is often considered to be from external stimulus. And then laxity is being too relaxed or tired, leading to tiredness, depending on which how we want to look at it. And then that dulls our object of concentration until we slip away and distracted and being too relaxed. So Rinpoche's got more to say on this, and so we'll finish off this chapter today, so it'll be a shorter session. And Rinpoche asks the question, it says, well, what are the underlying causes of laxity and excitement? So last week what we did was we discussed what they are and how to defeat them in terms of serenity, developing serenity. And here he just wants to touch on what they are and how to deal with it once we've managed to identify them and managed to actually treat them. So he's citing from Asanga. Asanga is one of the great key players in the Mahayana tradition, both in Asia and also in the Orient, across the whole of Chinese culture, Buddhist culture rather, where there is a Mahayana tradition. So Asanga says, what are the signs of laxity? How can we recognize laxity is not, or what allows for laxity to arise? And he says essentially some of the aspects we mentioned earlier on in terms of preparation. So not restraining ourselves in terms of our actions, not eating in moderation. In other words, tending to eat too much or too little. Not making an effort to practice rather than sleeping too much. A lack of vigilance, ongoing, both this is in terms of our behavior. So not being aware of our ethical responsibilities. A deluded behavior, acting from a delusional point of view. Oversleeping and being unskillful. being lazy in all of our aspirations, feeling I can't do this or I won't do this, or not even recognizing that I need to do this. So then this in terms of lazy in our joyous perseverance, our joyous effort, laziness in our intention. In other words, I'm going to keep my mind focused, essentially. Laziness in our analysis, understanding, and recognizing the nature of reality, and also the fourfold aspects of conditioned reality, which is suffering, impermanence, selflessness, and emptiness. So then these four, only giving partial attention to our practice of serenity without becoming used to it or training in it and refining it, letting our mind stay as though it's in darkness, sort of just keeping our eyes closed, just wandering around, not really practicing much. And again, and lastly, not delighting in the focus of our object of meditation. So this is the levels of yogic deeds by a Sangha who says this. So he says, well, and what about the signs of excitement? And again, he says the signs of the first 4 points for laxity, such as not restraining, not eating in moderation, and so on, these 4 are the same. They're also signs of excitement. They lead to excitement because they're unconstrained, they're unethical, or they're untrained aspects of our life. Behaving with attachment, clinging on to things, also thinking very much about our friends and our relatives, maybe our enemies. This is one of those questions. Being attached to the goal, and fantasizing about, let alone to the goal in terms of meditation, also fantasizing about normal worldly things, sort of normal life. Daydreaming, if you like. All of this is terribly difficult for serenity. Having a disquieted manner, in other words, being rowdy, noisy, excitable, all of these things. Lacking a sense of disenchantment. This is with samsara, with recognizing the nature of suffering. So again, if we're not recognizing a disenchantment, or if we don't recognize the suffering of samsara, then we're not going to be disenchanted with it. Being unskillful, again, keeping our mind unaware of how best to act in the moment. We might have good intentions, but then we fail to recognize the potential consequences of them, and then we make mistakes. Very easy for us all to do this. Having he says here, a great sense of grasping in our aspirations. So, and then also, as I said before, this aspect of enjoying, or when we begin to see some benefit, when then just grasping out the joy, the bliss that arises, rather than keeping our mind focused. Failing to stay with joyous perseverance, meditating in an unbalanced way, without refining the object of meditation. In other words, we're meditating, we're doing daily meditation, but we're not really applying ourselves correctly. We're not using our mindfulness and vigilance. So in the end, it becomes more of a daydream session than anything else. And again, being distracted by any sort of exciting topics, such as the news, or our family coming, or our family going away, or whatever it happens to be. So these sorts of things, which can fill our lives very easily. And then it's always or work. We might have a problem at work, or a challenge at work, or an issue at work, or a possible promotion, or a possible demotion. And this is like, and then a fixation distraction, or whether or not we have paid our bills, or all these things, or what I need to get from such and such for their birthday. All these things are just exciting topics that we need to do something about. So it's not very good. So Rinpoche says these 4 topics which restrain the sensory faculties and so on, which are mentioned in terms of the practice between meditation sessions. I think actually in the very first chapters of Lam Rim, when we're talking about maintaining a sense of ethical behavior, and keeping calm, not being enthused, and being interested in Dharma practice and less interested in everything else, these sorts of things. They're important for stopping both laxity and excitement. So they're real obstacles to our general practice on serenity. So once again, and he says this is mindfulness and vigilance in terms of our daily activity, right? So once, I've said this before, but when we begin to train it, when we do our training in serenity, then the mindfulness and vigilance we've developed or have some experience with in our daily life, of being aware of what we're doing right now, being aware, is my mouth saying the right sort of things, right? Is my body acting it correctly, and so on. My mind not wandering off into somewhere where it shouldn't. Then then checking in, watching out, and stopping it, right? These actions are going to be absolutely essential to us when we're working on our mind. We're training in our mind, then this is a bit more fluid. We need to be a bit more aware of that and learn how to be checking in, making sure things are being done. So it says, therefore, we can use, when we start off with coarse laxity, coarse excitement, and then we can begin to use that with more and more subtle laxity and excitement still. And he says it's important, even when we develop some experience in our development of serenity, that we don't tolerate this, even a very subtle laxity or subtle excitement. That when we should sustain our vigilance. This, he says, is quite important. And he says essentially, if we don't do this, if we don't continue while we have this very subtle distraction or a subtle excitement, sort of like woohoo, this sort of thing, even if it's about the meditation, it's like we'll see this arising. We need to cut it. We need to be a bit more serious. Just keep our mind calm. And again, if we see our mind dulling, which can happen at the end of the day, for instance, then we need to brighten it up, and prevent ourselves from slipping into laxity. So he says sometimes we might think that a slight excitement or distraction persist, even though I've cut most of it. So I won't bother with them. I'm just going to keep it focused like this, and keep my mind focused, and it'll go away in its own time, and sometimes also, even if they are so if they're just there, or they're subtle, or they're weak, and they seem to be sort of niggling there, then I'll just ignore it and I'll just stay on it. He says it's not correct. He says what we need to do is essentially we've got to persist in being quite vigilant, but quite strict with our mind at this point. It's a bit like it's like a bad habit that we can pick up if we're doing exercises, physical exercise or whatever. We need to keep on making sure we've got it correct, not allowing ourselves feeling familiar. We get more and more familiar as we train, not allowing ourselves to allow for these, even though they're subtle habits. We might be able to sustain our meditation quite easily, but they're coming in, and we need to stop it. We need to cut that. He says otherwise it's going to be harder and harder and harder as we're going to pick up these bad habits allowing this a sort of lack of vigilance, or this leading to a sort of a lack of a subtle laxity, or subtle excitement, and then we won't progress. And he says again, importantly, when we start, where unless we're very tired or sleepy, we will find ourselves most of the time being distracted by excitement rather than laxity. And when we are distracted by laxity, it'll be very coarse, and we'll just fall asleep, or we'll start dreaming, and we'll just be distracted very, very quickly. Both ways, remember, both is just going to lead to distraction, right, away from the object. One, it dials down; the other one, it sort of sparks off, right? It's like this. So he says it's really important to keep ourselves at first working on really coarse distraction, right, and coarse excitement. And he says if we do this, we won't necessarily have a clear image at all yet. So we're just trying to keep the image, or keep if we're observing the mind, we've identified the mind as our object of meditation, then we just keep the pressure on, right, on the object like that. So even though normally you think keeping the pressure on with mindfulness can lead to sort of tense, and it's like saying, yeah, but you say attention is leading to excitement. Really coarse excitement is like beyond even that. So we need to bring it much better. We need to be quite strong, quite strict with ourselves first of all. Not worry about, oh, maybe this is too excited. I'm already way too excited for this, so I have to be a bit tough, keep my mind a bit tough. Then we can slightly check in like that. So he says then, when that happens, when we begin to have a stability, when we're beginning to see our image, or the visualization, our object stable, or if we're able to sort of get into the zone with our mind like this, then to bring to keep it intense. So to work on the clarity and also the intensity, and essentially really allow ourselves to suffuse in it, to relax, to be comfortable in it. Relax not in a letting go, but in terms of feel comfortable, more comfortable, like that. Build this rapport, and then keep this vividity, and then that will help to prevent us from slipping into a laxity, into this dullness. So normally we start off, when we first start doing meditation sessions, we start off and it's like, it's a bit like, it's just like, it's just almost impossible. It's just like everything, I choose an object, doesn't matter what I choose, or choose the mind, choose a Buddha, choose whatever it is, and it's just like maybe gone, and then it's like, okay, so I need to work on it. It's a bit like, first of all, if we're doing jogging or running or in the gym or whatever, it just feels just like a hard slog. And doing even a little bit, and you see these guys or women or whoever, like doing this regular activity, and it's just like, I'll never get there. I'll never be able to do that. I can't do that at all. So, but there's nothing special about this. All they're doing is just being regular and consistent, and learning how not to make mistakes and not to get into bad habits. So if we do that, we can do it. It's very easy. And unlike the gym or jogging, which is good to keep fit, to have a strong body, that's very good in terms of healthy body is very useful. Doing this with our mind daily, daily practice where we come back to it, we work out doing our concentration, not allowing ourselves, being disciplined to be distracted, being disciplined, can lead to superpowers, right? Lead to become a Buddha. So the qualitative difference of using our mind, training our mind, compared to merely training our body is just dramatic, absolutely dramatic. So one of the difficulties, of course, lots of people are trying to commercialize or sell or tell us how to meditate and so on. And Rinpoche is saying, look, this is how we've been doing it for thousands of years. Let's just follow what everybody says. We don't need to do anything radically new. We can't listen to it. It's to do with our mind. We can't listen to guided meditations. We need to use an object of mind and sustain it. Keep our focus. And this is how we develop it. So then he says, so yeah, as we develop when we at first evolve, there's a tendency towards excitement, then there's a tendency towards laxity, and then we begin to recognize these, and we need to continue to work on them and become more and more familiar with them, check them out, prevent them from happening, keep our vigilance up, work on it. And so just like sort of in the end, we in order to sort of stay in the zone of our exercise or our jogging or running or our machines, we need to be able to know, we need to have the experience to be able to do that, and we need to be able to know how to sustain that practice. And then it becomes more and more easy for us. So he says, if we just think, okay, I can relax, and I'm just going to keep my mind relaxed, and sustain this relaxed mind, but we won't do it. We're being too undisciplined. We need to keep alert. We need to have some alertness. Not too alert. Too alert is too tight. So he says eventually, after we've got used to it, and we've been training correctly, after some time, we'll be able to bring up our object of meditation very easily. We're familiar with what it is we're doing. We'll see ourselves being able to stabilize rapidly. So this is a good way of knowing whether or not we're applying our meditation correctly. If we're not, then we won't be able to. So I was talking to, for instance, a friend of mine who finds who sort of finds visualization difficult, and he says, so when I try to do like a red square, then I can do everything. A blue rectangle is fine, or a yellow circle, or a purple a purple triangle or a pentagon, and they're all there, but the red square eludes me. So this really shows essentially nothing to do with our ability to visualize, not at all. More to do with the idea that we think we can't. Secondly, a reluctance to do this. It's like, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to try this. So essentially, there's a part of this which is clinging on to the idea that it's an obstacle for me. Yeah. So there are all these mind games we're going to be playing. Likewise, also, we can find ourselves when we're beginning to see progress, then we can actually feel shy of doing this because we're recognizing that we can change. And that can be really scary for us. But it's like saying, oh, actually, I can actually develop spiritually into a place where I might be able to work until I let go of my delusions and my self-grasping and that's a little bit scary. So we need to be aware of that and try to allow ourselves to say, yeah, but why on earth would we want to do anything else? So we need to be able to be brave. We have to be really brave and sort of say, okay, it's not about me, it's about everybody else. Can I deal with a little bit of fear in order to benefit others? Sure, I can. Sure, I can do this. So then it's this mind of saying, if I allow myself to get all giddy or sort of like inner or about, I can't do this, I can't. It's like saying, this is why bodhicitta, right? Our bodhicitta is, then different words are used some places, like sometimes it means Buddha nature, but actually bodhicitta here in the tradition, the original tradition, means the aspiration to become a Buddha. It's a positive mind, mental action. It's not something that we have naturally. Otherwise, it would be Buddhahood would be available to anybody. But it's not like that. We can all become Buddhas because we have a mind. But in order to achieve Buddhahood, we need to have decided to do it, and with the basis of that decision has to be a universal sense of altruism. So without that universal altruism, bodhicitta is not available to us. It's not available to us at all. We have to have this this complete aspect of recognizing a sense of duty for all beings, and then how we apply that is through walking the path, engaging in the Mahayana path. And then likewise the same, it's not different, it appears different at first. As we understand our insight into the nature of reality, then we have this massive, great compassion. We recognize the mess that we are in. We recognize our own in a sort of deluded state, and of course when we recognize it for ourselves, then we recognize it in everybody else, and then we begin to understand, and then we have actually this great compassion which is qualified based on this wisdom. So these two together help us to recognize the problem of grasping. Self-grasping. It's called self-grasping, not just about self, but also about the way in which we see everything. And on the basis of that grasping mind, we then recognize how everybody else has grasping, and then we want to walk the path. Then, if we recognize that we need serenity, we need to be able to visualize in order to be able to benefit, then these sort of little games, mind games, cease to be so much of an issue for us. So that's why we really want to make sure that we're determined. Our determination is based on a strong solid ground which isn't self-centered. It's about everybody. And that helps us to take on that sense of responsibility, helps us to say, it's not about me, it's about working for everyone. So that's really important in terms of recognizing how we want to avoid and how we want to empower our practice of serenity in terms of eliminating the obstacles that we might have. So it's not just a game, not a hobby. This is a decision of how we are going to bring meaning to our lives. So meaning of life, if you like, but what brings meaning to our lives, and therefore gives us a sense of identity in the world, gives us a sense of purpose, and gives us direction. Otherwise, we die, everything's finished. You might say offspring go, and they change, and then I'll be one of hundreds and hundreds of ancestors forgotten after a few generations. Nothing left. So family, legacy, and we might be the next Shakespeare or whatever, but even Shakespeare will be forgotten eventually. But if we can make a difference, a substantial difference through practice, then that makes a massive, massive change to the world. So then Rinpoche says, what do we do if once we've managed to do this training, we've been working on this training, we've managed to be able to establish this mind that's where there's no laxity arising, it's the object of our meditation remains bright and it remains stable, and then he says at that point, this is called equipoise. So we've got the balance, we've got the zone, we're in the zone, there's no laxity, there's no excitement, I can just do this. And there's a sense of it becomes a little bit more, one becomes a bit more confident. in session, one's not feeling it, one's just engaging in it, but there's a sense of confidence of knowing I can do this, I'm doing it. It's not in the front of our mind. Our mind remains in focus, but it's sort of like something unconscious going on there. So with that equipoise, then this confidence of being able to sustain this, we can see we are aware of the fact that the object of our meditation remains bright and engaging and clear, crystal clear. And at this point, then it's important to begin to let off the vigilance, right? Because it becomes an obstacle itself. And then one just sustains the equanimity. We know whether or not we're doing that because when we're ready for that, because when we are in a state of equanimity, there's no drifting off, there's no fading off. We can just sustain it. And then, so in that state, if we try and we see it dulling, then we're not ready for that. We need to keep on with vigilance. Or if we're distracted, same. So if we're still seeing distraction, even subtle distraction, then we're not in a state of equanimity. So equanimity is a word that Rinpoche goes into a bit of saying that generally within the Buddhist practice we talk about equanimity or impartiality, and these words are interchangeable in Tibetan and also in Sanskrit. And he says we're not talking about impartiality that we develop in order to achieve to train in altruistic bodhicitta. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about being impartial in terms of not really minding if I have a tea or coffee. He says what we're talking about is specifically to do with application in serenity. So this is where we have sort of found the zone and where we're able to sustain our focus, and then that's what we're talking about, is this mind which is free of excitement and laxity. So we're now in tune. Our music is in tune. We don't need to worry about tuning the instrument all the time. We've got the balance. We understand the balance, and then we're able to sustain it. So somebody asks, so how can it be? We say, you apply yourself all the time, and now you're saying, how is it becoming a problem, right? So it says, when we because we've been working so much on keeping our mind in tune, then we're even though we've developed confidence in our ability to we developed the confidence in our ability to sustain the object with great clarity and with stability and brightness or strength, then vividness, then we're still wary. So that wariness itself then becomes a distraction. The wariness of checking in all the time, it then is going to be the last part of our distraction in terms of our effect. So at that point, then we need to relax. So, and that's what staying in equanimity means, because we're actually going to be trained up enough that we can relax. We're going to be trained. We won't allow ourselves to, our relaxation at that point won't fall into laxity. And this is when we look at Mahamudra of this practice, which is, there's 6 words, of which one of them is relax. Or we look at many other forms where what we use as the object of meditation is our mind rather than of a visualization. then there's often an emphasis on relaxation. And that's once we've achieved equanimity, not beforehand. So if we try and do this and we relax our mind and we're untrained, then we'll slip. We'll slip into a dullness. And this is why I think Rinpoche carries on earlier on about saying, do not be mistaken about laxity as being a stable state. So he cites Kamala Shila, who of course wrote this incredibly well-known book, The Stages of Meditation, and who says that if we exert ourselves when a mind is in equipoise, then we're going to become distracted. So at this point, we need to stop the exertion. We need to stop checking in all the time at that point. So it says we don't need to be so effortful, so we're relaxing the effort, but we're not going to be sacrificing the intensity of the object. We're not sacrificing the stability of the object. We're just sacrificing the effort that we're putting in. And then this is when we can relax. So he says it's not as if once we've developed this equanimity, he says, once we initially see equanimity, when we're beginning to feel we're in tune, if we start relaxing too early, then we won't understand how to enter into equanimity so easily. So he says it's once we begin to recognize that recognize equanimity, we're more used to it, this sort of being in the zone, being in tune, then we begin to see how this exertion, excitedness and laxity can be overplayed, so we can drop it. But we'll have confidence then, it's not that hard then. So when we see this, then it's like much easier to do. He says, but don't. If you think you can do it now, if you can, I don't need to be mindful. I don't need to be controlling. Aware or effortful regarding my laxity or excitement. Then there won't be any equanimity at all. And he says, what's the sign? How do we know? What are the aspects of equanimity? He says, primarily the object of meditation, our mind, or the visualization, as we said, it just remains bright, clear, sharp, undisturbed, dynamic. We're still dynamic. We're not like going into a stasis. It's still dynamic. We're still engaged with it, but it's not moving. Our mind is sort of continually sort of changing, but at this point we've actually been able to bring it to a stable position. So we're breathing in and breathing out, but none of this is going to we're able to sustain this bright, lucid, clear and unchanging object. He says, how do we know this? He says, how do we know we're ready? When there's no laxity or excitement left, then we can relax. And he says, this is it. I mean, this basically what we've done is we've covered all the training required for developing serenity. He said, this is in accordance with Maitreya, with Asanga, with Kamala Shila, and many early masters of developing the technique for developing serenity. And then he cites Maitreya's verses which is sort of summarize the entire aspect of sustaining serenity. So we are staying with our perseverance, our joyous effort. Our mind becomes serviceable, and we attain all goals. Serviceable means we're now fully able to control it, and attaining all goals represents all the Buddhahood and the higher powers of super knowledges and so on. So the ability for us to achieve the path of insight. So this occurs as a result of eliminating the 5 faults. So the 5 faults are those of preparation, which are laziness because we're not applying ourselves to our practice. Forgetting the instructions is the second fault, is because we are forgetting what it is, how we're meant to achieve our greater serenity. Once we are in session, then laxity and excitement are the faults because they make our mind uncontrolled, unserviceable. Lack of effort, this non-application. So when we do recognize our mind's distracted, we don't bring it back, we don't keep our vigilance, we don't keep our mindfulness. And then once we've achieved equanimity, then the fault is over-application. So one is continuing to be vigilant at this point. Okay, so Kamalashila in his text, he says, you know, if you join laxity and excitement together, then that makes 5, which is what Maitreya has done. Or if you want to do them separately, then it's 6. So they're the 6 faults. 5 faults or 6 faults, and then we rely on the so we attain all goals by eliminating the 5 faults, which we've just gone into, and then relying on the 8 antidotes. Yeah, and they are this yearning that's based on effort, and is the wish to achieve basically the 4 faults to cut laziness, this confidence, yearning, effort, and pliancy. So recognizing the value of serenity, pliancy, developing a yearning for this based upon our commitment, our responsibility to all beings, confidence that we are able to do it, and putting the effort in, right? And then the remedies for, so that's 4, and then the remedies for forgetfulness, laxity and excitement, and non-application, right? And application. So essentially forgetfulness, the remedy for that is mindfulness. The remedy for laxity and excitement is vigilance. The intention is the remedy for non-application. So when remember, if we recognize something coming up, or possible distraction, or a little bit of dullness, and then the remedy for not doing anything is being determined to make a change, making a change. Yeah, it's no good if we have, you know, oh yeah, okay, oh I see I'm going to drift off, and then just let ourselves drift off, right? That's no good at all. So then this is another thing, is like when we're doing our sessions, is first of all we're like, okay, we've got a strong visualization or a strong object of meditation, like we decided to think about the clarity of mind, for instance, or the nature of knowing. Knowing, the basis of knowing is just the object of our meditation, or we're using a form of Buddha, or a part of Buddha or something similar. Then sometimes when we're sustaining the visualization, and then it sort of seems to vanish. So we need to be able to be quite strong on this, and then I can't even remember what it is I'm meant to be doing. So it's like, and then we need to be a bit aware of that, and to keep our mindfulness strong, right? Remember what we're doing here. Remember what I'm familiar with. I'm meant to be familiar with this object. It's not good if I'm not familiar with it. Familiarity doesn't breed contempt in this case. Familiarity makes it easy for me to sustain my mindfulness on it. If I'm not familiar with it, it's hard for me to recollect. If I can't recollect it, then I'm going to lose it easily. So we need to become very familiar with the object of our meditation, mind or visualization, either way. So so he says this essentially is the entire path to serenity in terms of dealing with the causes of serenity, the exercises involved in serenity, and so on. And he said we need to train in this. I think maybe he says this later on, but or earlier on, and I've skipped it, but I don't remember skipping it. So anyway, like we need to be training this. This is exactly the same as if we want to become fit, we want a six-pack, or we want to be, lose the pounds, or we want to do these things. We need to put it in every day, and we need to do it without sort of just falling into bad habits. If we turn up at the gym, we're just sat around chatting or looking at other people, apparently this is what people do, then this sort of thing is not going to benefit us. It's the work that we're doing in training that makes the difference. So getting onto the exercise machines, working at the machines, getting to know them, not allowing ourselves to be lazy in terms of I find out I can, if I do it like this, then I can do it easier. We need to follow the guides of the trainer. We need to understand how to do this. We need to use the equipment properly. We need to push ourselves to the right limit, know our limits, know our limitations, push ourselves just a little bit at a time, get used to it, never overexert, because we need to come back the next day. We don't want to waste ourselves today. So, and then feel too tired or too fed up to do it tomorrow. So we're always working on trying to recognize our own balance, our own limitations, our own abilities, and working to those. And then it's much, much easier for us, keeping ourselves determined to do this, determined, daily, doing our daily practice, right? Serenity practice every day is fantastic. We'll see progress. If we say, oh, I'm going to set 30 minutes a day and I'm going to sit there. We've got years and years of practice, it's fine. If we don't, then it's, and we know what we're doing, we know how to bring our mind into a state of equanimity, then whatever, that's fine, that's good. But if we're still struggling to sustain our mind on a basic object, we need to think, maybe I need to really examine what I'm doing, what my training is in this. Maybe I need to actually take a step back, maybe listen to what Rinpoche has to say and think, okay, what is the object of my meditation really? What am I looking for? Even if it's just a natural calmness of the mind, right? Then I need to make sure, how do I know that I'm still sustaining that mindfulness? How do I avoid myself from moving off it? Vigilance. How do I know that I'm not going to just let it go by not being too relaxed? How do I know I'm not going to jump out by not being too excited? Okay, all of these things are the same. It doesn't matter whichever tradition even non-Buddhists do serenity. It's not a Buddhist practice. It's a global practice. We're mainly in Asia, but many people have developed an understanding of serenity. So the training here is really important to make sure that we get it right, know what the steps are, know what they look like, know how to apply them. Then when we can get that serenity, when we can find the equanimity, then we can start relaxing a bit. And then a lot of the sense of the things that you find in the Mahamudra and other texts, then these begin to make more sense, right? Until then, it's like we need to allow ourselves to check in, right? We can do it. We really can. So he says, and also, look, don't be fooled. He says, they're using mindfulness, vigilance to remove these things in order to get to equanimity. Then when we can then apply stability. He says, this isn't just from the sutra. This isn't just from the Mahayana. This isn't just from Tibet. This isn't just like this. He says it's absolutely the same. He says, for instance, I can cite the Tantra. He says, people say in Tantra, oh, you don't need to do this in Tantra. People say it in Dzogchen, oh, you don't need to do this in Dzogchen. You have the same. He says, no, I can find the same things being written in Dzogchen texts, in Mahamudra texts, in the Tantras. It makes no difference. In the Theravadas, the same sorts of things, exactly the same. And so he cites the integration tantra, Samputi Tantra. It says, once we've developed this yearning, we meditate without being slack or elated. He says this slack is exactly what we're talking about. Laxity, elated is excitement. So all of these texts, he said, they all have the same thing about having a yearning, having this joyous perseverance, continuing to do it. A concentration is developed through understanding, and then again achieving this one-pointedness of mind, this single-pointedness, serenity, through avoiding being too tight, being too loose. So that's the end of chapter 4, and then next session is a discussion about the 9 paths of serenity. So the different levels of serenity, how to know where we are on developing those, and when and where how to apply them accordingly. So that will take us to developing an idea about the journey. We've got all the kit. We now know all the bits that we need to know. We know how to prepare. We know how to select a valid object or a useful object for meditation. We know what to do in session. We know how to put it through. We know what to avoid. We know how to check in. And then I think after the apart from attaining serenity, the next chapter, then what we do is we go and look at how serenity is baked into the path, so into the spiritual path, and then that will be the conclusion of serenity in the Lam Rim, and then we move on to the very, very famous and very extensive teaching on insight. Okay, so but now we are going to call it a day, I think. So let's consider what we've been discussing and think about wanting to recognize how beneficial it might be to actually think about it and inform ourselves from it and take it in and actually apply it to our lives. And then having chosen to apply it to our lives, to actually take time into our life to practice. So if we feel we're not ready for serenity, then we still can think about what we can do in terms of the preliminaries and developing, and also if we are doing serenity, to recognize we need to have engaged in the preliminaries, that we already have eliminated some of the coarse emotions in our lives, sort of fury and so on. We're following the 10 virtuous actions, or avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions, to recognize consequences, to recognize the nature of suffering and the problems of samsara, and then also developing a compassion, altruistic intention to benefit and to take on the responsibility of all beings, so that we can engage in the 6 perfections, and then with our generosity of spirit, our discipline, our patience, our effort, then we can work on engaging in serenity, and then we use that with insight to pierce through the roots of samsara. And then we're enlightened. How about that? Right. Okay. So let's think about, yes, that's something I want to do, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that because I want to free all beings from suffering. And why? Not because I just want to do it for fun. I'm doing it because that suffering is real as the suffering that I feel. Okay. So let's call it. Let's call it I'm going to try and shut up now, and then we can work on doing some meditation right now. And why not just spend a couple of minutes working on serenity.